And we're live for episode 157 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about this topic. Excited to talk Star Trek this morning. Bill can probably talk about it as well, but this topic, what we're talking about today, has been on the docket since day one, right, Bill?
Yeah, I think we talked about this like late 2016, early 2017, before we even started doing this as like something that got written on a pad of paper somewhere as something. Hey, we'd like to talk about this, and it's specific to you because your background is in filmmaking and you went to school majoring in things that are sort of in this ballpark. So
Yeah.
I'm very eager to kind of let you take the lead on this. This is your baby. There are a lot of things that I don't know. I think I know some things. I love movies. I love the production side of things, but I'd be lying if I said I had really any expertise at all in the more nitty gritty of, the visual effects side of things.
Yeah.
In terms of like terminology, what's a practical effect, what's a visual effect, what kind of what the criteria is for either or. And I think it'll just be cool to kind of talk about, the visual effects of Star Trek, like what kind of comes to mind as our favorites, and what's the first stuff that pops into our heads across the whole kind of spectrum of Star Trek. There's a ton of it, and you can kind of like look at the history of visual effects capabilities and like what holds up and what doesn't, and how it's done just by kind of watching through Star Trek in like chronological order. You get little tastes of across the history of filmmaking, really, going back to the 1960s. So, and there's TV and there's film and like different levels of budget and what's done on TV and what's done in film in different eras. So a lot of things to kind of uncrack, and this might even be something we maybe double back to in the future to get more specific, or to like dive into more targeted points or more specific topics related to this. So this is sort of just an overview and our general thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. As we are one to do, let's do our rewatch recap. Let's talk about where we are in our respective Star Trek rewatches. You are chugging along into Deep Space Nine's fourth season.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I mentioned it last time, because it was my last episode of Trek Live. If you guys are just tuning in, was about my rewatch, kind of completely with season 3. So I did complete season 3 onto season 4. So I've watched The Way of the Warrior. I've watched The Visitor. I watched Hippocratic Oath, Indiscretion, Rejoined, and Starship Down. A 6-run episode. I'm not sure if I mentioned those earlier 3 last week.
I think really briefly we talked about them, but not for long.
Yeah, so my last week or so has been these 3. I to be honest, I know it's coming, so it's just only, I think, gonna get better. Indiscretion and Rejoined are kind of maybe a little bit more shakier, middle of the road because of what it's around, maybe. But Starship Down is such a classic episode, and I think it was one of those episodes that we watched on Trek After Dark. So
we did.
Got to throw that out there. But Deep Space Nine early season 4 is just clicking on all cylinders. I think it's just very, very good.
Yeah, I really like all of these episodes. Really different levels for all of them. I really like Rejoined a lot. I think that's a really good Terry Farrell performance. Some really rich exploration of some like basic things that would come to mind for like what is the Trill experience, like these shared what happens when if I'm a host of a symbiont that's been around for a long time, and you have a symbiont that's been in you a long time, and we had a prior relationship, like what does that do to you? Like how does what are the practices? What are the recommendations? What are the rules and guidelines as far as that goes? And I think it's such a like a basic question, and I think they do so much with exploring the difficulties of that and the hurdles that would present. From like a societal standpoint, like what's allowed, what's encouraged, what's discouraged, what's really not supposed to happen, and just like on the personal side of things, like just on the really ground level for Jadzia and for that other character who, of course, immediately mine because I've seen the episode in a while, but Lenora Khan, I think is her name. If I remember correctly. Okay, it popped into my head randomly.
Yeah.
As things tend to do with Star Trek. Too many things like rattling around in my head. But yeah, I really like Rejoined a lot. I think, and I think with Discovery season 3 and the Trill kind of being front and center again, it's a nice, even more important piece of the puzzle, like the Trill mythology, and now that's even being further explored and more fleshed out. The stuff in Forget Me Not and beyond with the Dira and Gray feels like an extension of this almost. Like this is Rejoined is about two symbionts who had a relationship in prior hosts in years past.
Yeah.
Adira and Gray is exploring two people who were intimate before they were joined to the same symbiote. Like, and they both have consequences and challenges and things that are, unexpected about those kinds of dynamics. And they're such natural things to explore with the Trill concept. So I really like Rejoined a lot.
Yeah. I like that it's a struggle though. I like that it's like she's joined, obviously Jodzi is joined, but it's still like there's been episodes in the past season and in this season that it's a struggle to to be able to not act on or not just rely solely on one of the previous hosts' feelings. It's tough to be a joined Trill, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it sells this idea that going back to the very beginning of Deep Space Nine and in episodes like Playing God, when Jadzia is dealing with that young initiate and it's trying to, emphasize the difficulty level of this and that there are a lot of challenges with this, and you can't just join anybody. You can't just pick somebody off the street and give them there's a lot of training involved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of preparation. There's some people just don't have the constitution for it. Like it's not going to work out for everybody. So I think episodes like Rejoined are kind of really critical when it comes to like putting that into motion and allowing the audience to see the challenges that come from having this. And Blood Oath, Cyber Honey is in the room on YouTube and mentions Blood Oath, kind of explores that idea as well. Absolutely.
Big time.
Yeah, that same concept. So I think by this point we're getting into some really good. We've had some really strong episodes for Dax and exploring her as a character in Trill and really fleshing out that culture. So yeah, I'm a fan. I really like that episode. That kiss, it seems kind of maybe standard now. It's done on TV a lot. Back in 1996, that was a big deal. I remember it. It was a big deal at the time. I think it's really well performed, well directed. It's sensitive. I think it's a really good moment in a really strong episode. I wouldn't say it's like way up there for me. It's not like in my top 10 Deep Space Nine episodes, but it's in the upper quarter, I think.
Yeah, but you got to think of what it's around as well. I mean, season 4 is just so loaded with great.
It is
great episodes.
It is. No, it strikes me just listening to you like rattle off the episodes and thinking about it as hey, you're watching it now and kind of like seeing these episodes coming, and it really does start strong. I think Indiscretion is like a clear spin on it's the Searchers.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the classic John Wayne, Jeffrey Hunter movie, played Captain Pike in The Cage. Dukat and Kira are doing pretty much the exact same thing in the desert. It's very westerny, and the first time we see the Breen. I've always had mixed feelings on that one. I think because of, I'm sure we'll talk about it as we get further in to Deep Space Nine for you, and as I'm getting there too myself. I've always been a hot and cold person with the Kira Dukat stuff. I love when they're adversarial, and I love the conflict and stuff there. But when the sexual tension gets introduced and it becomes a more working relationship, I get a little more. I think that's a trickier thing to pull off, and yeah, that's some of those episodes I have mixed feelings on,
Yeah.
just because I don't know that I always buy that relationship. Um, so, Indiscretion's one that I like. I love whenever Star Trek goes on location, the location photography, the desert, the camera work there. Feels hot and barren and feels like a wasteland that is not a pleasant place to be. I think all that stuff's really well achieved. It's got a distinctive looking vibe.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Starship Down's great. That's a classic,
so
like
good. So
action adventure romp. Yeah. Uses the cast really well.
Everybody's got everything to do, like something to do. There's like a kind of survivally actiony thing. Again, we get Worf, like it's still an adjustment, O'Brien's gonna take him aside and say, hey, maybe ease up on him, and then there's this great exchange at the end. Well, you can't take your hands off the reins. You gotta, keep them tight. So I love that. But there's also some classic, like submarine-y type vibes too, which we've seen in Star Trek before, obviously. But just really good, really, really good.
Yeah. Yep. So overall, really strong run. Those first three that we talked about last week, these three, really not a stinker in the bunch. I think they're all strong, distinctive, and different from each other, and use different characters in different ways. I think it's a really good run.
Yeah.
So you got good stuff coming.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
What about you? How's your rewatch going?
It's going. I think since the last time we talked on air, I've watched Armageddon Game, which we talked about a good bit on your rewatch recap not too long ago with O'Brien and Bashir's sort of. The more building blocks there.
Yeah.
Actually, this 3-episode run that I'm on in Deep Space Nine, at least, is a heavy O'Brien run. Armageddon Game, Whispers, and Paradise.
Oh yeah.
Very Tom Meany heavy. He's got big things to do in all 3 of those episodes. I've always really liked Whispers as a twisty turny. I love the twist of it. I feel like that's one that if you go way a long time without watching it, I think that's an episode that can surprise you if you don't remember it well. I think Caleb mentioned in our Discord server that episodes like that deal with like synthetic copies or artificial life forms play a little differently now with Picard having not too distant future like bands on. Like, so there are new things to think about when you watch episodes like that. I totally agree with Caleb there, and I like that. I like the uniqueness of Whispers. And Paradise, I think, is like a classic Star Trek kind of. The one thing I'll say about it is we've talked a lot about Deep Space Nine episodes as you get rolling into the show, into the back half of season 2 and into season 3. I think they do a better job of getting into a rhythm of episodes that feel distinctive to Deep Space Nine, that feel only Deep Space Nine could do these kinds of episodes, and it has its own voice. Paradise feels like an episode that would work in all the shows. Like you could sub
any captain and any crew member. Yeah,
you could kind of put them off on that mission. That could be a Kirk and McCoy story.
Big
it could
time.
be an Archer Trip story. You could go anywhere with that story basically, and it would work with very minor adjustments. I think Discovery could do that if you wanted it to. So while I love when the shows have that distinctive voice, I do like those like classic kind of, you use the word tropey Star Trek kind of story, but I don't mean it insultingly. I think there's like a comfort level with that. It feels like a warm blanket, I think, and I've always liked that episode for that. I think the guest star, Alexis, I think her name is really nails on a chalkboardy, like tough and difficult to deal with. And I think Sisko's experience in the box and all that stuff is pretty memorable, and some of my favorite early Avery Brooks stuff.
Yeah.
So. And then TNG, real quick, Lower Decks, I watched that. That plays differently with Lower Decks as a show on, because I think Lower Decks really does, the episode Lower Decks really does do a lot of the things that the series Lower Decks like really heavily leans into. The senior officer poker game with the junior officers kind of hanging out doing the same thing, the crew evaluations, the kind of competitive nature of the junior officers trying to like get promoted and put themselves in the best position.
Yeah.
Suck up to the senior officers, wanting like all those things that are like so present in the series Lower Decks. I think really did come from the Lower Decks episode.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those traits are within TNG all the way through, but the casualness of living on the Enterprise. I mean, that I think the series Lower Decks really embraces.
But
I think it's interesting to watch. That was the first time I've seen the episode Lower Decks since the series Lower Decks. Yeah.
It also has such an emotional punch that sneaks up on you at the end. So,
oh yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
it really does. It's a great episode. It's great on every level. I think the guest stars are all wonderful. The junior officers.
Strong.
Yeah, and it's underrated, I think, or maybe under-discussed. Like, it's a mix. I mean, you have a couple brand new characters there with not Vorik, his twin brother, basically, same actor, the Vulcan engineer, and the young helmsman are brand new characters. But Agawa, the nurse, is very present. We know her, and Sito is in the First Duty as a character. This is not the first time we've met her. So they're kind of reintroducing or further expanding on characters that have existed in the past. So it's not just like pulling out completely brand new people. So it just, I think it works on so many different.
Which is an element of serialization that TNG does have. Yes. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sito's experience in the First Duty is a major part of this. That's Picard uses that, and that's a part of there's a reason she's on the ship, and it's really great. I think it's a really well constructed episode. The poker game that intercuts between the senior officers and the junior officers, I think, is some of the more inventive, really well done. Editing, the structure of it is more innovative than Star Trek: The Next Generation sometimes is on that level.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that too.
Yeah.
So, definitely the best TNG episode in a while, and Sub Rosa, I watched that, which is really rough.
Yikes.
Of course. Interesting episode for sure. Naturally, but not a favorite. But apparently, people like it. The poll that I currently have up of the 4 episodes, which of these 4 episodes is your favorite? Sub Rosa is among those 4, and it's winning with a decent amount of votes.
Wow.
Just shocking. It's shocking to me. Shocking. So, if you're listening, save that poll. Go vote. And do the right thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's good enough for our rewatch recap. We went longer than usual. A lot to talk about. I love talking about these episodes, and we could just cover an hour of talking about,
do that
everything
week.
We've watched. But we could, absolutely. Ian's in the room. Welcome, Ian. Love to see you here.
Welcome, Ian.
Talking about watching Stargate SG-1. Good stuff. Do a little intro. What are you most eager to talk about today? Visual
I'm most eager to try to at least educate some people on terminology, some history. I'll try to get some photos up as well. But and after that, at the end of the day, I'd like to hear your guys' favorite visual effects shot. One that just comes to mind when you first think of visual effects. That being said, I'm going to jump into the terminology right now. So, technically, everything I use the term visual effects. That's kind of like an umbrella term that practical and CGI, I'll call it, which is computer generated images, which is kind of the later half of Star Trek's history and techniques they use. Those techniques kind of bounce around. As you guys know, they start with the practical stuff, and then kind of move into that CGI range, which is a combination of a couple things. Budget, which we'll probably talk about, we have talked about, and then just the technology in general, right? So, the practical technique has been done from Star Wars, a bunch of different.
2001.
2001 it's franchises, movies, and things like that. So what practical is they would actually build the model. They would build it, and they would use special lenses, and they couldn't be too close, but they couldn't be too far away to make it look so toy. So they had to have the right distance far away, and then it would be behind it would be a green screen or a blue screen, and they would just composite whatever they wanted behind it, and the technology allowed that. So I have some personal preferences when it comes to the style of visual effects that have been done. So I do prefer the practical side of things. I like the craftsmanship, the attention to detail that they went into to putting into these models to actually build them. And I think that when you do that, it adds a sense of realism to it. Like when you look at it, you're like, man, I could just reach out and touch that, right? So
Sure.
I do love the practical stuff, but once we started moving out of the practical stuff, into TNG, they started to experiment with CGI, which is computer generated images, with little things, like the crystalline entity and things like that. They started to kind of move it into kind of the forefront of their style because, again, budget, but there was some restraints, like I talked about, like with budget, because they got to do this on a weekly basis. But also practical is not cheap too. So
Right.
the
Labor intensive, right? Time consuming.
Big time. So, moving into that TNG era, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, they kind of went to CGI because of the technology was just getting better. So, I want to say that the last hero ship that was built for a model was, in fact, Voyager. So, and then later in the show, that it became a CGI model and things like that, and we kind of went from there. So yeah, that's kind of the progression, right? The TOS era, they kind of started with practical effects and things like that, and then as the movies went on, and then into TNG, they started to sprinkle in the CGI stuff with the advancement in CGI. I mean, it was some of the stuff holds up, some of it doesn't. I think they've done a good job of remastering some things, especially with TOS. So yeah, that was a big dump.
Yeah.
Trying to think about some other things.
There's a lot to talk about for sure. I mean,
and then one other thing, just kind of get to kind of close my kind of initial thoughts. There's other visual effects, and not just people think of the models and the ship shots and things like that, but a big part of the visual effects scene, not just in Star Trek, but in a lot of different things. You'd be surprised how much it's used. But set extension with visual effects is used so much, like, and it's again, it's part of the technology, right? Where we can get so good that they can make this big old landscape when they can just have a green screen. Like, I mean, you guys have seen behind the scenes stuff, you guys know, but yeah, set extensions also are a big part of it too. So
yeah, I feel like when it comes to like set extensions, and one of the things that pops into my mind that is, I think, obviously radically changed over the course of Star Trek's history is, I think if you go back to obviously TOS, some of those early movies, early TNG, matte paintings were such a big component.
That's
like,
right.
You're planets, right. The establishing shots, they would use them for set extensions, and then I think obviously as you get deeper in later Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and beyond, it's all digitally created, stuff. Just the first thing that pops into my mind, when you talk about that extensions, it's like a bizarre. I don't know why the episode's on my mind, but I'm thinking of that scene in Enterprise's Cogenitor, where Trip's talking to that other engineer, and they're in the alien ship engineering section, and it's clear. I mean, it's clearly a digital creation. It's a digital set. It's not something they went out and built, obviously. Where I think in earlier shows, things like that would have been achieved probably through either a practical set or a matte painting or something like that. So you're right. Set extensions are not something that I think for me personally, when I think of the effects, I'm thinking of ship shots. I'm thinking of things in action sequences. explosions, phaser fights, things like that. But just simple things like extending a set, making it look bigger than it is, giving things scale, are critical components in Star Trek. The things that are done week in, week out to add to the production design and give it more value added to the just the overall production. So there is a wide umbrella, I think, that's covered by this. I think that's one of those things, like if you watch the special features and you see people like Dan Curry interviewed and Ronald B. Moore, Robert Legato in the early TNG years, they I'm sure could school all of us in like just how much they did to give these shows that little extra juice in ways that are probably not front of mind for like the casual viewer.
Yeah.
But you kind of pose the question that I think is like inherent to this kind of conversation is, which do you prefer, the practical or the computer generated, more modern visual effects? And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Keep going. I just have something after once you finish.
Sure. No, I think like anything, there are positives and negatives. The practical model visual effects that you get in movies like Motion Picture and really all those TOS movies, and even in the original series and earlier shows, like there is, like you said, a tactile, almost you can reach out and touch it, the detail oriented stuff that you just can't replicate on a computer. And I love that stuff. I love like the reason that Forever Long in some people's minds shuttle pod fly up scene in the motion picture works so well is because you can just stare at that ship and just take in all the details and the paneling and the hull plating and all that stuff. Just like if you're into that stuff, it just makes the whole thing work.
Yeah. Which the element of detail you mentioned, I think they still struggle with today. Like I feel like
they do.
It does feel futuristic, but I don't get that sense that I can reach out and touch it. Like it's that sense of realism.
Yeah, I think Ian mentioned. I think he said something, maybe in the comments, that the model work just doesn't seem to age as well. Yeah, Ian said, I'm amazed that some of the models and the practical effects tend not to age so much, and I would agree with that. I think one of the things that you get with the computer generated stuff is it becomes locked in time. Like there are things in early Enterprise, especially all of Enterprise, that at the time when I was watching that show contemporaneously, when it was on being aired, it felt really cool. It was fresh and new. It was in line with what the upper echelon TV shows were producing on a visual effects level. These shows, the Enterprise won Emmys for visual effects. They were nominated year in and year out. Like they were top of the line in 2001, 2002, 2003, and beyond. So, But when you watch them 20 years later, I don't know that they hold up as well.
Here's the thing, though: a staple of science fiction in general is visual effects. Like it's pushing the boundary of being like, wow, look at that. So even if the technology and isn't there, they're still trying to push the boundaries. They're trying to do like the cutting edge of what that is now. So I mean, I get that argument, like especially with the Suliban and things like that. That's a big, just coming from just in my experience, that level of detail is really hard to get. Like I think they definitely nailed down the ship stuff, but I think when you start doing like especially with Gorn too, like the later Gorn stuff as well.
Just mentioned CGI.
That stuff again, but that's them being ambitious. That's them pushing the visual effects boundary further. That's a staple of Star Trek. That's what they've always done.
Oh yeah, no, for sure, absolutely. Going back to early TNG, I think there was some really ambitious stuff done in Conspiracy with that motion capture. The little parasitic aliens and Rennick and his exploding head, all that stuff was really pushing the boundaries, I think, of what TV shows could do in 1987, 1988. And you're right. I mean, they've always kind of pushed the envelope, I think it's just the nature of the beast. I think when you go back and watch anything from the 60s or the 1980s or whatever it is, it's going to age. I mean, it's just natural. I mean, things are going to progress. Our expectations are going to change, and what we're exposed to is going gonna change the way we look at things that came before. So no matter what they do, I think, and when I watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture, I'm like, my jaw drops sometimes at how well the model work holds up and how well some of those visuals have aged. But at the same time, like, it is clearly a product of 1979. I mean, these are methods and practices and the way visual effects were done in the 1970s, and it's not the way it would be done now. So it still feels a product of its time. So I don't think there's any way to kind of avoid that. So you should, I would imagine, just kind of embrace it, and either way, that's what's going to happen. So there's no way out of kind of becoming a product of your time. But I do think, if you put a phaser to my head and said, hey, what do you prefer, the practical or the computer generated, I would always go with the practical, just because like you said, I admire the craftsmanship of it. I think there's something to be said for, a model builder piecing together this thing and building it with their hands, as opposed to kind of sitting behind a computer desk and building a digital model, which I think is equally, I'm sure, difficult, and there's tremendous technical achievement in every time they do that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I love the practical when they're able to do it.
Yeah. It's really tough, because at the same time, like, I do want that level of detail, I do want that level of realism, but also it's the CGI just opened up the door to be able to do way more stuff. Like, you don't have to build an actual model, and it's we've seen in Star Trek before of them reusing it, but also, I mean, we can get different ships, alien ships, just great set extensions. It really does. I know I feel like I've been preaching the save the practical style of visual effects, but CGI just really changed the game as far as what we can do. So
I think the other thing that really kind of pushed, I'm sure, the desire to do some things with, like, one of the things that I'm sure makes CGI such a more attractive way to go from, like, a storytelling standpoint, is there are inherent limitations to, and so what I'm about to say, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but, like, because I think the battle sequences in Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, are some of my favorite things in Star Trek's history, right? Like, they're really great. They're tense, they're scary, they feel impactful, but they're really minimal when you think about, like, how little they were able to do. These ships fly up to each other, they stop, they fire phasers at each other, and then they go away. When you compare that to what, say, Star Trek Nexus did, with the ships flying all over the place and using evasive maneuvers and showing all these things that the ships are able to do, and they're aerodynamic and able to move, and they're barrel rolling, and there's all kinds of things that you're just not going to do with these gigantic, expensive models that can only move so fast, and the camera has to, like you said, be positioned in just the right way, and you can't move the camera a certain speed, or the limitations that are generated by that. Now, there's something to be said, and I'm sure there's a debate there about what the more effective space battle is. Is it Star Trek II with the minimal submarine, slow crawling ships that draws? I think it fits the theme of that movie.
Yeah, fits the theme.
It feels at home in that movie, and it feels, maybe it's all, like, in a package deal of it's a product of its time, it's 1982, that's what you would expect, blah blah blah. Where Nemesis is 2002 and CG is like.
I have a headcanon fix. I think the battle techniques have changed, along with the technology of the ships and things like that. So that's how I kind of headcanon fix it as well.
And in Star Trek II, the first battle is the ships. Kirk doesn't know it's an adversary. He's flying up to a Federation ship thinking they're going to hail and have a conversation. Like, it's not a pre-planned battle situation. And then the climactic battle is in a nebula where the story calls for them to be extremely limited with what they can do. They can't see each other. They can't just fly around. Like, they have to be super careful. Their shields are down. Their sensors are down. So it works beautifully, and it's some of my favorite stuff across the 800 hours of it. Where Nemesis leans more into the balls to the wall, bad A, like, space battle stuff. And I get what I'm trying to get at is with the CGI, at least that's at fingertips. You can do that. Like the limitations aren't there anymore. You can have the ships do it, and then that's kind of demonstrative throughout the shows. Like in TNG and Deep Space Nine, even in the early years of Voyager, the way you can kind of tell when they go to the digital models is, do you get more variety in the ship flying by shots? Like when you think about the Next Generation, there are about 8 or 10
that they
flyby ship reveal shots that they shot probably when they were doing the pilot.
Exactly.
And had in their stock, and different angles of the ship flying by or flying up to you, and at warp, at impulse, coming down, coming up, going by. Like they have their stock options. And then when you get to later Voyager and Enterprise and now the new stuff, sometimes you only see, like now with Discovery, you might only see that ship shot one time in that episode.
Think of book ship.
Those are ship or book ship. Yeah, you're getting that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like absolutely, you're getting specific ship shots now for the episode. When you watch, like I said, when you watch Lethe, you're seeing specific to Lethe shots of the Discovery. And then you get a different one in Magic to make the same as Mega Man. The next episode, that was not happening when they were doing model. And in TOS, I think they had like 5 shots of the Enterprise. They would use, or 6 or whatever. But so the variety of presenting the ship and keeping it fresh, I'm sure, isn't attractive, and it is. I mean, it's nice to get the different angles, but there's also something comforting about those same old, angles and shots too. So it's
CGI complicated production, but it also simplified production, right? We don't have the production staff. They don't have to learn how to shoot like a ship. They can just stick to live action of the sets they've built or have redressed or things like that, and just kind of separate those two,
right?
Kind of areas of production, which I think is, again, it simplifies it, but also it complicates it as well. So, but it's also, again, it's great too because it gets I'm sure it does, but it gets outsourced to other companies, maybe not in the country and things like that. So that allows them to be more efficient, but also in times of COVID, right? They could still work. So there's some great benefits, not just to the other things we've mentioned, but in that regards as well.
Oh yeah.
But
in 1990, if COVID hits, you're not getting season 4 of the Next Generation until the virus is over.
Yeah.
Like, that's for sure. I don't think you can get.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that works.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure, there are definite benefits to these technological advancements, and I wouldn't want to. Yeah. That's obvious and clear that there are clear benefits that have benefited the audience and that are good in the grand scheme of things. It's, like I said, Star Trek is one of these things, like Star Trek, James Bond, things like these long-running franchises that you can kind of like. I always say this, but if you want to see like how Hollywood's image of like a big budget action adventure movie changes over time, watch the James Bond franchise. Like you can see what a blockbuster in 1964 looks like and is presented as, and what the pacing is, and how it's what the traits are by going from Dr. No to Spectre, right? And Star Trek's kind of the same thing. You're getting in one franchise the because it's science fiction and it leans heavily into visual effects and you can really kind of chart the changes in what was possible, what the capabilities were on the television side and the film side.
Yeah.
So the spectrum is wide, like, and there are tremendous achievements across all of it. Like when I think of the original series, how simple and how some of those things don't hold up terribly well because they're 55 years old, which is like, what do you expect? These are TV show productions from the late 60s, but stuff like in the Tholian Web, when they're on the Defiant and the ship is phasing and they're in their spacesuits and they're putting their hand through crewmen and through equipment and confused about what the heck's going on. And then later when Kirk appears on the Enterprise and he's phasing and Spock's looking at him, like that stuff holds up really well. When you watch the remastered show, they didn't feel the need to update that like that because that just works. I think so that just goes to show that these things can hold up really well, and throughout all these shows that look darn good, and have really stood the test of time, going back all the way to the original series. Some of the stuff in the cage, the matte paintings on Talos 4, and the way that planet set looks the same. I think they use the same basic set for Where No Man Has Gone Before on Delta Vega, where they maroon Gary Mitchell. Like there's some real scale to those like matte paintings. And it feels like a big place. I mean, it's a 1960s, alien planet on a soundstage, but it holds up pretty darn well. And I think I've talked a lot about Metamorphosis, the way that planet set looks, and the way that they use the camera to give scale and size, and like all things, your mileage may vary, and some things may work better for this person than that person, and not every episode has effects that work as well as the episode that came before it and the episode that might come after it. But you'll find examples of really tremendous work for the time, and that has stood the test of time, from TOS all the way through current Discovery.
Yeah, you guys got to remember that this is an art form. This is a craft. These people work so hard, and so I just want you guys to have a little bit of perspective, right? We have more powerful, like, a computer in our phone than they had back then. We had better cameras than we have on our phone now than they had back then. So when you quote like Devil in the Dark with stuff like that, and the practical things of that nature, like just remember, just put yourself 50-plus-year-old show, and they were pushing the boundaries. So
yeah, in the chat, they were talking about the Horta, and I think what I'm about to say, I'm comparing our TOS, and I'm sure if Discovery did the Horta, it would look better, and if Discovery did the Gorn, it would look better than when Enterprise did it. But I don't know. Like, I remember when In a Mirror Dark aired in 2005, and they did the CGI Gorn, thinking, people have laughed at the suit Gorn from Marina, and it's campy and silly.
Yeah.
But finding myself wishing for it in 2005, man, I think that's better. That works better. It's more attractive on camera. It works better for the story than what they did with the CG version. So I don't know. Like I think the Horta looks great in Devil in the Dark. I mean, it's retro, it's old, but it's I don't know. Like that's one of the things that I think stands out really well for me in TOS as a effect that it's clearly a product of its time, and it's silly and it's ridiculous, but I think it holds up pretty darn well given what they were capable of.
Well, look at the Andorian, right? There was probably temptation to be like, hey, let's be realistic. Let's be realistic. Let's, but I think they're practical too, right? The antennas,
absolutely.
So
absolutely. Yeah, talking about the special effects from the motion picture look great for 79. Yeah, I think the high point maybe for me, for like if you're looking at like what's possible, because that movie had such a big budget and so much time was spent on the visual effects. I think they hold up pretty darn well. I think like I said, there are things in it that really stand out as well. 1979, not in a negative way, not in a whoa, this doesn't hold up. Just like this is what movies from 1979 did and looked like.
Yeah.
But incredible, like like I said, the shuttle pod fly up to the Enterprise, the shots of the Enterprise approaching the cloud and V'ger, and
that's what comes to mind for me. Stuff from the motion picture. When I think about this topic, that's what the first thing that came to mind was.
Right. Me too. I think the visuals of that movie are so iconic and staple. They're such staples for like giving Star Trek its visual language beyond the original series, like presenting what Star Trek was going to look like.
Yeah. With
the ships and the visual effects, like all that is such established language in the motion picture.
Yeah.
Because of how well it was executed. But a really silly practical effect that I've seen in bonus features like comes to mind, like super simple, not like a space shot, not a ship shot, is Chekhov's ear in the Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
That's like a practical thing. Like that's a giant ear on a skin painted mat that they dropped a giant insect out of with blood like that. I think that looks great for 1982 and holds up really well. But if you watch the bonus features on the DVD of the Wrath of Khan, you can see how they did that. That's as practical as it gets. There's nothing computer generated.
But it's still successful though. It's still like I still cringe every time I see it. It's still it's still successful, I think.
Very much so. But in that same movie, the Wrath of Khan, I think, is kind of credited for using some of the first CGI, that Genesis video of showing what the Genesis torpedo is. That's early CGI, and I think that actually holds up pretty okay. I mean, it's definitely 80s early CGI, but within that movie, I think it works pretty well, and it's certainly an iconic piece of Star Trek's history as like the first time that they really used that kind of technology. So a lot of talk about the Gorn, neutral in the Gorn. Cyber says the movement in Arena was weird, but I kind of it was intentional for the story. It allowed Kirk more time to set up for the near kill shot. Yeah, I mean, there's dialogue in the Arena about that the Gorn is slow and not agile, but powerful and keeps coming like there's no stopping it. It's relentless.
Yeah.
So they found it. There's dialogue in there that if you're open-minded and willing to look past the obvious silliness of it, that you can get there. Got to use your head cannon.
Yeah.
Gorn moves too fast as compared to the one in TOS. Jimmy 77 says about In a Mirror Darkly. Yeah, like that's what got me. It doesn't feel like the same species to me. I wish they would have. The Xindi, talking about the Xindi in Enterprise, that's a clear example. That's like some of the first attempts at like computer generated characters that we get. That becomes I think at the time, what the Lord of the Rings movies were doing, I think maybe started that with Gollum, that trend of people wanted to kind of copy that and achieve that. Like,
but that's on a motion picture budget.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
So when you see the Suliban, it's like the Suliban and some other elements of the Xindi as well, but
absolutely. But the motion capture, like actor, the sensors, the way that Andy Serkis did the Lord of the Rings, I guarantee you that if you were the Enterprise, production meetings in 2003, getting ready to do season 3 of Enterprise, like hatching the Xindi, like deciding what we're going to do, what are the Xindi, what are we going to do, how are we going to do that?
Yeah,
you bet your bottom dollar that they were talking about the Lord of the Rings, what they were able to do with Gollum. Of course, they were operating on a massive budget at the time, but even that, like, you go back and those movies are tremendous. Like, they're some of my favorite movies, but like I was saying, these things are products of their time. There's no running away from them. I think they're 20 years old now, and they show their age at times, and the way that those movies they would be done differently now. Like, they would look different if they made those movies in 2021. The visual effects would look different than they did in 2001, 2002, 2003. So there's no running from that, and it kind of just is what it is.
Again, Star Trek and science fiction are always pushing the boundaries of the cutting edge of the technology. So I think, again, 10, 20 years from now, Star Trek's going to look different in this. We're going to be looking at, well, I don't know. It might be a little bit different, but it'll be an adjustment for sure.
Yeah, I would always tell people when they say, friends have watched it or seen it, and they go, it's old and it doesn't hold up and visual effects aren't good. Like, look at the Emmy nominations from 1987, 1968. Like, these that tells you that these were top of the line, state of the art, cutting edge productions at the time. Yeah, if you're looking at them and you can't separate yourself with 2021 eyes, and you're watching the original series or the Next Generation, you're gonna be like, oh come on. But
think Miami Vice did anything like this?
The nature.
Are you kidding me? Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure. What are some of the visual effects that come to mind for you? Your all-time favorites? Are there shots or things that are just like within, like, what comes to mind when you think of Star Trek visual effects?
Besides what we kind of talked about before with the motion picture. It's Voyager crashing down on in Timeless. Yeah, I really do like that shot as well. Some Deep Space Nine, not what you would think. The wormhole. That people always quote like the ships and stuff and the set extensions, but there's also some really cool stuff done there. Like it opening, I think is a beautiful, really cool visual effect, and inside, I definitely like that as well. So, and then obviously, the battle sequence in Deep Space Nine as well comes to mind for me. Yeah, I think that initially those are the ones. I mean, we could definitely talk about stuff that, in the newer stuff, especially when you, there's some really cool stuff in Beyond. I think that's kind of refreshing a little bit, with the worker bees and things like that. That's really cool. But again, that's a blockbuster budget, so of course they're gonna the Yorktown too. Oh. Then when they're going through it, you can see the ship is just like, that's cool. I wish we could take that and switch. Like, let's take the motion picture audience out of the time and then show them the Yorktown footage. That way they would lose their minds. It's awesome.
Yeah. The Timeless, the crash sequence there blew my mind in 1998. That's amazing. I think that holds up. I think those images of the ship coming down and literally hitting the ice and like bouncing off, and that stuff is really, really tremendous. And some of my favorite visual effects stuff in Trek.
They do a good job of feeling the weight, like hitting it really hard. Like I feel like a lot of when a shuttle or crash will be inside with the crew and it'll be nice and But this is just like you can feel the weight of it, just like smacks. Sorry,
well, I think like
out there.
You always hear like visual effects artists and people who work on the show, like on the production side, production designers, cinematographers. They always talk about like their work has to like all be in service of the story. Like they think about the way the script's written, things that are in the script, things like lines of dialogue, and trying to enhance what's written on the page through whatever their craft is. And I think there's like when you think of Timeless, there's lines of dialogue in there about the crew being killed on impact, and I feel like that feeling of bang, the ship just slamming into the ice, like that sells that. Like the minute they hit that ice, they're dead. Everybody on that ship's dead. Yeah, like there's just no surviving that, and that feels impactful, literally, when the ship crashes. So. That's an example of, I think, the visual effects being completely in tune with what's on the page and the groundwork of the story in the episode. Cyberhoney's talking about the Enterprise D-crashing in Generations.
That's practical.
That's practical.
There are shots. They built the saucer. Yeah.
Yeah. And like a miniature forest and like shot it outside in natural sunlight and that's translated well. I think that stuff really holds up. I think some of those early 90s movies actually, like, I think what works there is like that's the end of model work really being the
peak.
I feel like Star Trek VI, the battle with the Enterprise and the Excelsior and the Bird of Prey, that shot of the torpedo coming up and blowing through the primary hull of the Enterprise A, like, and a lot that entire battle sequence and Generations with Bird of Prey and the Enterprise D crashing, the Enterprise B and the Nexus, like the way that kind of uses the model work at its peak, I think, is some of my favorite stuff. It just feels so real and tactile, and there's computer generated elements there as well, but it's they're still using the models. Feels labor intensive and detailed and big and to scale. Like it's just, I love all that stuff. Those movies feature a lot of my favorite visuals for sure. For me though, when I think of Star Trek visual, pops to my mind is the stealing the Enterprise from Star Trek 3 out of space dock. I think the again, kind of like Star Trek 2, like the slow movement, the score, everything about it, but like just the shots of the Enterprise like literally backing out of space dock with the detail of the inner wall of the space dock and the Excelsior off in the distance, kind of coming at it too. Mm-hmm. That's a memorable thing for me.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the stuff in the Tholian web really holds up for me.
Yeah.
You know, the stuff on the Defiant and Kirk appearing on the bridge of the Enterprise, phasing out.
Yeah.
Is really, really strong stuff for the time, and I think it holds up really well. Conspiracy, another one that comes to mind. There's a shot in Enterprise, the council at the end of season 3 with the sphere kind of coming at the camera with the fleet behind it. And
yeah.
Big battle. Like, I think that's a shot that like really capitalizes again on like the story. That feels like a race. Like the sphere is coming, it's moving fast, this fleet is chasing it.
Yeah.
Like that feels in service of the story and really enhances the drama. Mm-hmm. That shot really feels like Enterprise CGI, like at its best, which sometimes doesn't age terribly well.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff in Twilight, same kind of thing. The shots of the damaged fleet.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. There's so much of it. There's so much of it across all of it. But to be honest, maybe my favorite thing are like the most simple things. The transporter effect, going back to TOS.
Yeah, that's a visual effect. Yeah.
Effects. That's a visual effect that is a staple. And what is more Star Trek than...
That's hard to do.
What speaks Star Trek more than Kirk, Spock, and McCoy standing on a transporter pad, disappearing and appearing on a planet's surface? Like, that is Star Trek at the end of the day. I mean, that is so inherent to what it is. It was groundbreaking for the time, and it's specific to Star Trek. Ship shots are kind of like you get that in all things. Star Wars, 2001, whatever, Silent Run, whatever science fiction thing you're watching, Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
That's been done many, many times across all kinds of things, but transporting, see transporting.
But isn't it because the budget, they didn't have the budget to get in a shuttle and go down and things like that. So a visual effects was born because of the budgetary. Oh, that's a great. I can't believe I forgot about the transporter.
That's the point. I think is that it's so taken for granted as like that's just something they do, and it's in every episode, and they do it all the time, and it's it doesn't feel big, but it's in the DNA of the show specifically. Cyber Honey says TOS or all show transport, all of them. I mean the whole thing, but TOS. Like I said, that I'm sure was groundbreaking at the time because it wasn't something that was just done willy-nilly. I mean, Lost in Space had ship shots of, I think the Enterprise and the original series even remastered holds up better than a lot of stuff in Lost in Space. But that wasn't like a brand new idea. Like that was done in movies and in TV for years before the original series came along.
Yeah. But
standing on a transporter pad and appearing on a planet's surface was, something that, at least I think, is unique to Star Trek and holds up pretty darn well.
One more for me. Sorry, this just came to mind. Sure. Trials and Tribulations. That stuff, but also the use of, how they have like two, like they'll have two people like the same, like they'll have the actors like the same. I don't know. Like it's just really good. Like with Trials and Tribulations, we get like modern stuff layered into old stuff, which is great. But I like the fact when we get to see like they use the like it'll be the same actor on the same shot. Like they'll be able to like cut into that, which is cool. Which we've seen before with a bunch of episodes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think. Yeah. Oh no, that's a huge achievement. I think that's certainly that's the Forrest Gump effect. That's where that came from. That Forrest Gump came along and did the inserting Tom Hanks with JFK and into all these historical events. That's where the inspiration for Trials and Tribulations came from, and they executed that perfectly. I think that's really great how well that was up.
Yeah.
You talk about like digital set extensions and putting actors in, like they didn't rebuild the bridge of the Enterprise for
No,
that. They did an
no,
Enterprise for In a Mirror Darkly.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing in Relics, when Scotty's in the holodeck on the Enterprise D, on the bridge of the Enterprise. If you go back and you watch like bonus features of that, they built like a teeny little like Scotty's console in the engine, like the engineering station and the turbo lift. Like there's a teeny little piece of the Enterprise bridge with the helm station too. Like there's it's a teeny little thing, and the rest of it was done with digital effects, digital effect extension. So there are really interesting examples all through history with things like that too. But Trials and Tribulations for sure, I feel like, is the crowning jewel of that kind of work.
Yeah, Cyber Honey's mentioning Odo. Yeah, that's another thing. Like this, we got a shapeshifter now.
Oh yeah,
that's all
Odo is
this whole species.
Yeah, that was groundbreaking for the time. Yeah, absolutely. That's one I think you can kind of chart the improvement that I think it's effective all the way. It's such a staple of that show, but they got really good at it, I think, too, with those shapeshifter effects through the 7 years. I think they really honed that skill, and you can see that's one of the things that, like, from season 1 to season 7, you can see the
evolution.
Yeah, the evolution of the effect. Good call. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have to have a part 2 for this, because there's some things that's coming to mind now, but I'll definitely save that for another time, because I love talking about visual effects.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is so much to talk about. Show and really look at screen grabs and clips are difficult to do on YouTube for sure. But like there are so many ways you can talk about the visual effects of Star Trek, and there's so much of it. Cyber Honey mentioned the opening credits to In a Mirror Darkly. Yes, there's a lot of cool stuff in that. Yeah, really, really great. You could go on forever, for sure.
You can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that'll about do it for this week. Thank everybody for watching live. We have Jimmy77 here in the Facebook, or not Facebook, in the YouTube. Live stream. We had some people popping in and out. I see Rob was in for the Periscope. At least popped in. If you watch this live, we greatly appreciate it. You'll be able to find it on on YouTube, on our YouTube Trek Live channel. You'll find it on Twitter as well as part of the Periscope feed. But as always, Trek Live is best experienced as a live stream event where you can chime in and kind of steer the conversation in one direction or the other. As you heard listening or watching, we interact with the folks who are here, and sometimes that can send our conversations off in unexpected directions. So, but you can also find us on anywhere you can find podcasts. Trek Live is published as a podcast as well. If you prefer to consume your Star Trek content in that fashion, you can.
Real quick, I'll mention a podcast that I just listened to. Bill and I are big sports people, so it was kind of refreshing to see Trek Ranks do the sports references. That was a really good listen. That's about all the sports I can handle right now. But moving forward, definitely if you guys have any recommendations, I'm trying to move out of the sports stuff, and it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be Trek. It could be other things. So if you have any podcasts or content recommendations, let us know. Twitter, Discord, you guys know the drill.
Yeah, there's so much good Star Trek stuff out there. We've had a habit going back to the very beginning of usually ending our show with a shout out to a podcast or a YouTube channel, and there's just so much. Sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. But we could go on forever. We could do a whole show on
again with our rewatches too.
But I completely echo that on Trek Ranks. I think the Trek geeks are doing an Enterprise retrospective, which of course I love. Discovering Trek. It's going through Enterprise for its 20th anniversary, which is horrifying to me. And what else? I want to pick one more to give some love, and just going through my podcast feed, and I'll say a weekly track is a great one, especially these days.
Oh yeah,
new episodes to dissect if you want to keep up with, what's going on in the world of Trek, things that are coming, tidbits of news. It's sometimes difficult to sort out, like, what's a rumor. There's always clickbaity stuff appearing on Facebook pages, and not the most reliable places to get your Star Trek news. If you want really reliable, well sourced, or just like what's actual confirmed happening stuff, check out a weekly Trek on the Tricorder Transmissions Network, published by Alex Perry. It's a good source for Star Trek news.
Yeah, he's a good dude. All right, we'll be back next week with more Star Trek content. We'll see you guys then.
Yeah, thanks everybody.